and welcome to another monthly episode of From the Horsebox. I'm Kate.
And I'm Claire. Today we'd like to start by quoting from our local historian Matthew Dennison's autobiography of Roald Dahl as a way into our next guest. He's very relevant, as we shall see.
Roald Dahl's attachment to the countryside runs deep, and he regarded himself as a true countryman.
Also, Dahl remembers haymaking, hay wagons and horses, and at harvest time fields of corn stooks through which he and his sister wandered at will.
Now that we have set the scene, we hope you will enjoy the extra special qualities of recollection and description of our guest who, like Roald Dahl, is able to create a magical wonderland for children.
A very warm welcome to our guest on From the Horsebox this month, Ed Walley, a dairy farmer now retired from near Cheshire, who's also an inventor and the originator of the best and the most loved theme park that is the Crocky Trail.
Thank you so much, Edward, for agreeing to meet us without knowing us or even much about podcasts. So, how would you introduce yourself?
But I'd like to start off really by telling you how my family arrived at this farm. We don't own the farm, it's the biggest farm of the village. But of course this is a typical village. When I was a little boy, there were about 10 small dairy farms in Waverton. Now there are 2. And myself and Tom Bramall. And my farm has grown in size, but my farm contains the land of 4 or 5 original farms, so does Tom Bramall. And the combined production of these 2 farms far exceeds what those 10 little farms produced. For example, here on this farm, we now milk 600 cows. My dad milked 120 cows by hand. And so the milk yields of each cow is 3 or 4 times more profitable or productive. So this farm now produces 12 times more milk per day than my father did. 12 times.
So
yeah.
You are the 3rd generation farming here?
Yes, that's right, yes. My grandfather,
yes.
Richard Walley, they were very religious. He had all his 17 children, two died in infancy, but we all went to chapel, and there's a chapel in the village called Walley's Chapel.
17 children?
I don't go there anymore. But when old Richard Walley died, I found an obituary in the Chronicle, which I want to read to you, because it shows you what a strange, narrow life they led. It was all work,
So you're about to read us from a survey on the local area many years ago.
Yes. Cheesemaking is the principal industry on this holding. Remember, this was written at about 1901. 5 cheeses of about 70 a piece were turned out per day. From this, of course, I can calculate the yields, which were very, very low compared with what we do today. There are 3 cottages on the holding to which Mr. Walley nominates tenants. One of the occupiers has been there for 18 years. Wages are 17 shillings a week, less 2 shillings a week for rent. The hours are long, from 4:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. For hay harvest, 6 pence per day, extra is paid. You can tell from this that these people worked and had no time for leisure. That was 7 days a week. 17 shillings a week is equivalent to £85 a week by modern money, but the farm worker today, of course, earns £400 or £500 a week.
You gave us to look a very unique film of farming from the 1930s, and it was an amazingly rare, I consider, footage of the old machinery and how farming was done with all your siblings. And everybody looked extremely happy.
How interesting you should say they're all happy. My memory was not of a happy people. My father was remote. He employed 14 men. He wouldn't even know their wives' names. It is distant. And our dairy farm, of course, it's 7 days a week. They had no time off.
So it was extremely work-orientated.
Oh, dreadful.
All the time.
Yes.
So would you say it's been a hard life?
By modern standards, dreadful. Of course, their only social life was the church, because my father was an ardent teetotaler. Now, when he died, can I just read you the obituary that appeared in the Cheshire Chronicle, which speaks volumes for the kind of man my grandfather was. Death of R.P. Walley. Deceased, although a Baptist and a member of the Tarpley Baptist Church, which he occasionally attended, was more prominently identified with Wavent Presbyterian Church, where he held the office of treasurer for 20 years. He was a lifelong teetotaler and rather strict in his antagonism to all kinds of alcoholic drink. Of temperance, again, they could say at once that he was a very ardent supporter. It might be said that temperance was his hobby, but he did not ride his hobby to death. Oh, yes, he did. He was full of a burning zeal for the liberation of the people from the shackles of the dread foe of our country, and no movement to assist that lacked his generous support. So there you are. They worked long hours. They didn't drink. They didn't go socialise. All his social life was in the chapel.
So with such a hard life, were they very well placed to withstand the hardships of war?
Well, of course, life on the farm was so hard that the army seemed like an escape. Of course, as we all know, the First World War was only going to last till Christmas. So my father and his brother Harold joined up. My father served the full war in the trenches. Harold, on the other hand, he was killed. So of the two brothers who went to the war, only my father came back. And there was a feeling that all those that survived the war were heroes, and so on the Westminster estate, he was considered the natural tenant of Cotton Abbott's farm, and so he became a tenant. And two or 3 years later, Richard died. And then my father married, and he had, of course, 8 children. And I'm the eldest of the second batch of those 8 children.
Your farm today and your farm when you took it over from your father are two very different things. Can you just describe the contrast in the two?
You couldn't imagine the contrast to be even greater. My father once said to me, you'll never see the changes that I've seen himself, because he was born into a world without electricity, without cars, without telephones. But he died in 1967. He never once saw a motorway or a supermarket or a tractor with a cab or a colour telly. He saw a black and white telly, you see. And I've seen in the last several years more changes than he could dream possible. So if you imagine now the farm when I was a little child, I remember the 14 farm workers with their wives. Remember, their wives were contractually bound to milk. So they came to work on a bicycle at 6 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 days a week. Their only excuse to escape that was if they had small children. I do remember one of the wives bringing a small baby in a pram, and she milked. My earliest memory was of hand milking, 130 cows of hand milked. And we did have tractors. We had the old Fords and Standards, but we had all horses as well. My sister's job early morning was to bring up the horses, you see, because the horses did, in haymaking time, the horses did all the swathing, raking, and generally drying of the hay. We did have tractors to carry the loads back to the farm. My father endured some wet summers. He told me once, that the farm workers used to dread hay harvest. Well, it would be dreadful. I mean, imagine going into a 20-acre field with scythes. How awful. The poor horses had a tough time as well, Everyone had a tough time. Now, of course, it's extremely different. And just to bring you up completely up to date, as you might know, we're at the moment, 2023, we're putting robots in. We're putting robots in to milk the cows. So can you imagine a more extreme change? With my dad claiming that he'd see more changes than ever I saw. Oh no, nowhere near. So we're borrowing $1.7 million to put in a robot system and a new shed to expand the herd, and that's going all right at the moment. If you come back in November, we will see all these cows being milked and nobody about. The farm can't support that kind of borrowing. The farm hasn't been profitable for 20 years, except for the last 2 or 3 years. And as you know, the food prices have shot up recently. And so the farm is now profitable for the first time ever, almost.
There'll be 10 robots, and tell us how it all works.
Yes, right. We know from experience that cows give 10% more milk on robots than with traditional milking parlours. This is because most farmers milk twice a day. We milk here 3 times a day, but in a robot system, the cow pleases herself. She can be milked, if she's freshly calved, she can be milked 3, 4, or 5 times a day. She pleases herself, and she helps herself, you see. Admittedly, she's fed while she's being milked, so that encourages them to come in. Incidentally, if one cow is too wily and thinks, oh, I'll have 2 feeds instead of 1, if she goes back in again, of course the robot knows who she is and sends her straight through unfed. So, but generally, the modern robots are pretty capable. Even though I've been a dairy farmer all my life and born up and brought up on a dairy farm, I've never loved cows, as you need to if you're going to be a great cowman. My father actually was only half interested in cows, but I was never interested in them at all. It didn't matter to me. It was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to milk dirty cows and then doing it 7 days a week. Who on earth would want to do that? My interest was always first the machinery on the farm, of which I was quite good. I spent my whole childhood welding things in the workshop, and when I first started farming here, there were gaps in the machinery available. I thought, well, I can do better than this. And to invent machinery, first of all, you've got to find a gap in the market, something that doesn't exist. Well, back in the early 60s, the muck spreaders were dreadful. Forage harvesting equipment was slow and unreliable, and I felt I could do better than all these things. And my mantra has always been to make a machine as simple as possible. And so I ended up by building 3 machines, which went to a manufacturer in Priest, Whitchurch, who put them on the market, and 3 or 4 of my machines won silver medals at the Royal Show. The best machine I ever built was the dual spreader. Dual implies that it could spread liquids or solid manure, which didn't exist at the time, surprisingly enough. You could have one to do one and the other to do a tanker to do the liquids. But on farms, you get a mixture. And my machine was extremely efficient, big capacity, and we won a silver medal. And I won a silver medal then with 2 or 3 other machines.
So you are an inventor?
Yes. I would be remembered by most of my neighbours as an inventor. That's
and
right.
These machines are the basis of machines that are still used today,
yes.
Obviously.
Well, the machine, the dual spreader, which is my best invention, was market leader for 30 years. And my forage harvester, which was used for zero grazing. Zero grazing is where you cut grass and bring it to the cows. And my machine was the only one on the market to specifically do that. There were French machines, but they were terribly unreliable. And my principle was to find a gap in the market and satisfy it with a very simple machine with as few moving parts as possible. So the dual spreader had only 2 moving parts. But the traditional spreader would have 10. Remember, every time you had a sprocket or a gearbox, you introduce something that's going to break down. My machine was very reliable, terribly important. And the forage harvester only had 2 moving parts. And the straw chopper only had 1 moving part. So these things went down well.
So are they used a lot in Cheshire, your machines?
Yes. The fact... my patents ran out 20 years ago. And, considering we'd had so much success at the Royal Show, winning the silver medals, remember there is no gold medal. To win a gold medal, you have to produce a company, not a machine. So with all the success we had at the shows, I should have ended up earning a lot of money.
Ed, part of the farm contains the enormously successful Crocky Trail theme park. So how did this all start, and are there crocodiles?
Oh, no.
And where does the name come from?
Well, there is no animal half so vile as Crocky-Wock the crocodile. On Saturdays he likes to crunch 6 juicy children for his lunch. So the idea was to pretend there was a crocodile down on the stream. And sometimes the parents repeat this to their children. But of course, no, the Crocky Trail was based on this a little bit of beautiful stream we have. It's the Gowrie Brook, and the hawthorn trees reached over the stream on both sides, and there's a pathway down there, only for 50 yards, but I liked it so much that I extended it each end so that it reached back to the road in a kind of horseshoe shape. And I declared it open to all the kids in the village. And it was wonderful, because it became my hobby. So the kids would pour around the trail, and I was always building rope swings and bridges and things, and it became more and more popular. But it was free. It never occurred to me ever to charge. First thing was, of course, I was worried about the insurance position if somebody got hurt. So I didn't charge for 4 years. Then some woman fell in the stream from a rope and hurt her ankle and sued me. So
that seems very cruel when you opened your farm.
Well, I realised at that point
free of
that
charge.
Declaring it free to the public was no defence in court. So at that point I started charging, and you know, it's become wonderful. Never looked back. Charged £2 to begin with 30 years ago, and then it went up and up and up, and now the trail got better, and I planted a lot of trees. Those trees are now mature trees.
So it's 30 years ago.
And I built better and better rides. But I always stuck with my mantra of simplicity. My very best rides have only 1 or 2 moving parts. But if you go to the Big Dipper at Alton Towers, there'll be 1,000 moving parts. And not only are they unreliable, but there's a danger built in. So I built the trail with simple moving parts and simple single moving parts. And the other thing is very important is no queues. I hate queues. And I built so many attractions that no matter how many people turned up, there was still plenty to do. So children now can spend 8 hours there, and when they come to go home, they don't want to go home because they haven't done everything. So that's wonderful. Now the Crocky Trail makes a fortune. I've given it to my son Jim. So look at the irony there. I've given the dairy farm to Andrew, which hardly makes any profit. I've given the Crocky Trail to Jim, that makes a huge profit.
But they work alongside each other.
But luckily they work together. And another very lucky thing was when I opened the trail 30 years ago, there were 2 shares. I had to have a company for insurance purposes, and 1 share I gave to Andrew. So Andrew, even though he's had no input, has always been a 50% owner of the Crocky Trail. So anyway, the 2 men work well together, and we're now involved in this huge enterprise of the robots, and we need to raise 700,000, and the Crocky Trail will do that, you see.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So how many visitors can you get on your best day?
Oh, yes. Our very best day was only a month ago, on Bank Holiday Monday, where we had 4,000 people. And I'm not going to do the arithmetic for you, but can you imagine 4,000 people all paying a good, I'm not going to tell you how much, but paying a good sum. And then we have ice cream sales and food sales. Jim's bought a pizza making machine, which costs 20,000, I think. And so we sell about 200 pizzas a day. So everything's wonderful down there. And the money pours in.
Well, that's a fabulous story.
But there's still enough space for them all to run around and without the queues.
It's terribly important when children are out there enjoying themselves that there's no queues. The only queue might be for teas and coffee and cakes and things, and ice cream, but there's no queues on the rides.
Tell us about the highs and lows of that.
Yes, well, the biggest problem has always been, of course, the safety. And with children, and the danger of getting taken to court, and the cost of insurance. Well, it'll surprise you to know that our insurance started off at about 10,000 a year, and it keeps coming down because we never ever claim. We always settle ourselves. It's terribly important to keep lawyers out of this sort of thing. The minute the lawyers are involved, they add 10,000 quid straight away, even for a cut on the elbow. So we've got a system now whereby we try and settle any accidents as soon as we can, before they even ring up the lawyer. Anyway, that works quite well. We do get taken to court because often, we can't settle with these people because they've already been to a lawyer, and then we have to fight it, and we've lost cases. But the big step forward is when we put cameras in place. Do you know there's 40 cameras down there now? And the cameras are quite inexpensive, And when an accident takes place, like a bashed elbow or a black eye, we go straight to the camera room and see what actually happened. And invariably we find a defence. Someone got pushed, or someone didn't go on that ride at all, or someone was running along and fell over. So all these things we are now protected against.
Your youngest son, Jack, also runs another Crocky Trail.
Yes, well, with our success with the Crocky Trail, which has been enormous, we of course thought we could franchise this all over the country, one in every county, It's not terribly expensive to set up. So we bought then a 9-hole golf course near Kidderminster, and we've opened a Crocky Trail down there. We didn't call it Crocky Trail because they were a bit worried about the name. The local planners didn't want that name. It was alarming. This is too big, So we called it, the local village is called Haberley. So now we have the Haberley Trail. And that's going quite well. But it's only half the size of the Crocky Trail, and it needs now to be invested with more equipment and more rides.
So it just shows that people are looking for this sort of enjoyment for their families.
Oh, yes. Do you know, the other day, a couple were leaving with the child, and the father said to the child, "We've got 10 minutes left before 5 o'clock. Do you want to go on one more ride?" And, of course, the answer was yes, so off they went. Now, that means they've been there all day, and they still wanted to do more. Now, if you went to Alton Towers, you'd be ready to go home because you've done it all and you're fed up with sitting in queues.
The Crocky Trail also fits in with your conservation on the farm, and also you have a special love of trees, we noticed.
Right, the circle. Remember, the Crocky Trail is a mile long and it's an approximate circle. I had to plant a couple of hundred trees to complete the circle. And of course, after 25 years, they've grown up now. But I've always been interested in trees. They say, as you get older, you become more interested in trees. And it is true.
Do you hug them?
The trees could be my hobby. I planted 700 trees this year. I remember my father said, "I build my pigsties with brick because they last forever." Oh, no, they didn't. Because I knocked them all down. We don't have pigs anymore. But if you plant a tree, that lasts forever. There's lots of trees on this farm over 300 years old.
So, Ed, you play a large part in village life over the years in Waverton. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that commitment that you have?
Well, I am naturally interested in entertaining the children in the village, as you might gather. And about 35 years ago, I went on to the carnival committee, and it was a typical chapel carnival. It's fete, really, cake stalls, jam stalls, card stalls, nothing really exciting.
Floats and a Dairy Queen and this sort of thing, a May Queen.
Yes, they did that.
Yes.
That was the better part of it. But on the carnival field, really, there wasn't very much exciting. And of course, this is where I can excel. So I would take certain mobile pieces of equipment from the Crocky Trail for the day. And I ran the carnival well for 30 years, and we did it on the village green, so we could have terrier racing and tug of wars across the canal, and BMX bikes doing stunts, lots and lots of.
Sounds a lot of fun.
Yeah, lots and lots of good ideas, and that went on till 2010, and then once again I got taken to court. Some lad had cut his elbow, and so if I had lost that case with all the costs, it would have come to £47,000. Remember this: that the law was such that if a lawyer sued you and won, he could charge a success fee, which meant he could double his fee. So in this particular case, this lad had cut his leg, so their costs had reached 16,000, but if they had won the case, that would have gone up to 32,000. My defence costs had reached 8,000. Then say the lad had got for the cut on his leg, which is long since gone by the time the case came to court 2 years later, and say he got 500 quid for his cut on the leg. My total costs would have come. I employed a specialist from London to come and give some legal evidence. Now I would have lost £47,000.
But you won.
We won it. Yes.
Hallelujah.
But I thought, are these people serious? They think they can put me at the risk of £47,000 loss and still expect me to do the Christmas tree and still expect me to run the fete. And so I walked away from it. And so the carnival's gone back to what it was, a church event with very little for the kids to do.
Oh, Ed.
I know, there we are.
Well, such an interesting life, Ed, but sadly I think we better wrap it up now with some quick-fire questions. Claire?
Now, Ed, what would be your favourite holiday destination?
Barbara and I don't really go on holiday. When you live in paradise, why should you go on holiday?
That's an excellent answer.
But listen, I've got a little story to tell you, which I would like to add.
Yes.
Many years ago, when the Beatles were at the height of their popularity, they were flying out of Liverpool Airport, and the crowd of girls and young people were screaming and yelling and trying to touch them and pressing from all sides, and they could hardly move. Anyway, eventually they got on board the plane, and a reporter said to them, "Do you like this sort of thing?" And John Lennon said, "They like us, therefore we like them." And I thought, now there's a mantra. They like us, therefore we like them. And I realise, that if you like people, they inevitably like you back. That's true, isn't it?
I think we've touched on your motto for living there already, Ed.
Yes. The opposite, of course, is equally true. But you use this. If you don't like people, they don't like you. They'll know, So if you go through life liking people, you're going to have lots and lots of friends.
Yes, it's the glass half full, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
So on the friendship side, a dinner guest of your choice, so could be living or not living, who would you like?
Well,
Yeah.
I've got a very quick answer there, because I love him. King Charles.
Oh, wonderful. Edward, you've achieved so much. What would be your proudest moment of achievement so far?
Well, I was Liberal Councillor for Waverton for 11 years, and last year I became Sheriff of Chester, and my proudest moment would have been that.
So finally, we like to finish with a joke or a motto.
No, I would hate to tell a joke, because jokes are not funny. You know that, don't you? I mean, you've got dreadful people on the telly, and none of them are funny, are they? None of them.
It was such a privilege to spend time with Ed, a rare species indeed. Thank you so much. He's been so generous with his time to allow us to come and record this, and he's given so much to his community in many ways too.
A big thank you from the Horsebox, and we look forward to next month when it could be you in the driving seat.